Matilda, your host for today. Thank you for joining us at another episode of Sprout HR and Finance Experts by Sprout Solutions in partnership with ASEAN HR Leaders Circle Philippines, a non-profit organization whose membership is for HR leaders. Its aim is to develop HR leaders group in the ASEAN region and exchange ideas to enhance HR practice. How are you? I'm sure this is a critical time for HR, and so we're here to give you practical advice to help you lead your company. By the way, we're live on Facebook. Just to give you a brief introduction to who we are, Sprout is an HR technology company that helps your company take it to the next level in terms of taking care of your people. We provide systems and support for recruitment, timekeeping to payroll, and analytics, all in a cloud-based system to enable work from home for you. And now we hope to be able to help lift up your team during this crisis. So while we're waiting for everyone to tune in, I'd like to introduce you to the raffle mechanics. So here's how you can join the raffle. All you have to do is collect all three keywords that will be flashed on your screen throughout the seminar. Follow our official Facebook page at Sprout Solutions PH. Comment all three keywords on the post pinned on our page, and we'll announce the lucky winner at the end of the session. We'll be sending the gift certificates through email after the session before 6 p.m. So for the first raffle keyword, it is industrialization. Again, the first raffle keyword is industrialization. Prepare your questions for the fireside chat session later and ask us anything on your mind with regards to matters concerning our topic today, which is Industrialization 4.0 in HR during COVID-19. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to our first speaker. He is the founder of the ASEAN HR Leaders Circle Philippines and also a director of development for Philippine HR Group. He is also a training consultant for DuPont and SGS Philippines, facilitating ISO standards, management soft skills, Lean Six Sigma basics, management consulting, and Kaizen seminar. Let us all welcome Mr. Marvin Zoilo.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's safe at your homes and definitely either you're working at home or you're just staying with your family. Everything is great with you and be safe. I know we have been locked down in our homes, but definitely this is something that we should be, still be grateful because we have our health. So today we'll be talking about industrialization and definitely we'll talk more about what's happening in the ASEAN region. So to give you an insight, definitely there's a lot of things that has been happening in terms of in the ASEAN region, not only just here in the Philippines but also around the world. So what does it mean? It means that throughout the last at least 2 months since this started, the pandemic has provided us an opportunity to revisit on what's happening in our country with the industries that we revolve around, and also what's happening in terms of the business, geopolitical, socioeconomic, and other aspects of our society. So being part of the ASEAN HR Leaders Circle, our advocacy is to ensure that we are able to provide support and also understand the different practices and needs in terms of the HR and also business partnering. I know it's a little bit new to a lot of different companies in terms of business partnering, but that's definitely a lot of the different organizations are adapting in terms of being agile, being available, and also keeping a very strategic view of what's next in terms of their business. So to give you more of a background, my next slide will give you an idea of how our organization works. Um, so I've been in the HR field for the last 20 years, and I've been attending a lot of different symposiums and conferences. I've worked also in several different industries, from the manufacturing to the automotive, even in the finance field, training development, as well as safety and compliance. So this spaces that I revolved around in the past years had led me to connect with great leaders and great thought leaders with other countries, not only here in the Philippines but also in the ASEAN area, in the ASEAN region. So the ASEAN HR Leader Circle is available in 5 different countries: in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Thailand, in Indonesia, and Singapore, and of course in the Philippines. Um, so this collaborative initiative has led to many different kinds of partnerships that will provide insights and cross training, if not cross pollination of ideas and strategies. So the workplace environment has totally changed. On the next slide, thinking about, what's the ASEAN is talking about in terms of industrialization. Think about, the Philippines, maybe some 20, 25 years ago. The BPOs in the Philippines, or the business process outsourcing industry, was totally unknown. Basically, it's not available to many organizations in the past. It's a totally new thing. What we know for a fact, that way back in the 1980s, India was really the big boom in terms of outsourcing, mainly because either they have the capacity, maybe they have the infrastructure, and also their command of the English language is also great. And then it came that about the middle of the 1990s, where a lot of companies are looking for other avenues and other availability of resources. And of course, the manpower in the Philippines is something that they are very interested in, because of our English, that is very much embedded into our culture, as well as in our education. So in terms of the industrialization, when we talk about that, it created a new industry in the Philippines. So 15, 20 years has gone past, and the industry of the BPO is definitely something that is a force to reckon with. That's why you have organizations such as CCAP and others who really, provided an opportunity for organizations to get in touch with each other and really create a big impact in terms of the economy in the Philippines. So it's a multi-billion organization. So what does it mean in terms of the people? So from an HR perspective, new jobs are created. Even 20, 25 years ago, some of the jobs that are now available in many organizations, such as in the BPO, is relatively new. And that also includes in the automotive as well, in the financing and the banking industry. A lot of new things had been introduced. So keeping in touch with what's happening with the businesses also has led to a lot of industrialization in terms of the mindset and also technology that they're leveraging. So the next slide will give us an idea of what are the different jobs that actually emerged during the last 20 years. So, if you're going to think about it, maybe in those who were, already working way back in the 80s or the 90s, the jobs were more geared towards either the medical technology or maybe more on the sales. That get, you need a lot of the skill set that is more physical and, hands-on. So manual labor is something that it's very, very useful. So the skill sets at the time definitely requires more of that sort. Um, but if you're going to look at it from the source from ADO in 2018, you know there's a soaring demand for workers that is more for the like the critical thinking, maybe more on the creative side. So that's why software development, IT, these are the different jobs that had emerged and even surpassed the jobs that had been, the staple way back in the 80s or the 90s. So if you're going to think about it, what's next for the industrialization? So when we talk about industrialization, we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution. So what's next? Maybe a lot of the different people, um, you know, who's attending this seminar or this webinar, I mean, it's like, you know, 2015, 2016, we had seen a lot of different uh, seminars or conferences that talks about integration, especially in the ASEAN region. So the ASEAN integration is supposedly to happen this year. I mean, so 2020 is a big number that everybody was geared towards to, or this, really anticipating. Because why? If you're going to look at this slide, artificial intelligence, robotics, even IoT, the Internet of Things, even machine learning were already been talked about. So it means that these are the tools and the technical requirements that a lot of companies will be using in 2020. And we are here now, 4 years after, 5 years after from those talks, we're living it. It's just so happened there's a COVID that happened at the first part of 2020. But it doesn't mean that, these components and dynamics had gone away. Actually, it has propelled a lot of organizations to be more agile and make decisions, overnight, which in the past may not be possible. So if you think about it, a lot of companies are now using artificial intelligence into their business or even machine learning. So that's why when you're looking for your shopping online, whatever app that you're using, the application will provide you sometimes suggestions because it creates an algorithm that provides you your behavior, the way that your behavioral pattern is being captured. So it provides you some suggestions on what to take, or it pushes you to look at different products or even services available online. So on the next slide, in relation to the work in 2020, talking about robotics, the next slide will provide you some idea as to, what are the things that we have to be aware of. So according to the World Economic Forum, the fourth industrial revolution, starting this year, actually 2 3 years ago, it's already started. A lot of companies will be feeling this disruption. So we've been talking about disruption for the last couple of years, and 75 million jobs will be lost if not disrupted, according to the World Economic Forum in 2018. But there's a good news to that. It means that 133 million jobs will still be created. So you know, just like the same thing, I'll use an analogy on the next slide. Those 75 million is relatively being replaced by robotics, and it has not just started a few years ago. It has started decades ago. Just example in the manufacturing or even in the automotive industry, a lot of the jobs have already been replaced by robotics. This is not something new. Um, so a lot of the adaptation of the companies is to make sure that they're able to leverage on technology, not because they don't need people, but because they need efficiency. So efficiency equals to savings, and even in terms of their production. So it exponentially creates that opportunity for them. So it's not just in those areas, but even jobs that we grew up with, like example, your mailman, or even those who sell in on the streets in the past, things like that. Those jobs have been lost, but it doesn't mean that the services had gone, but instead they were just replaced in a new thing, right? Because of the automation. So all those repetitive, manual labor and easily outsourced jobs are now being replaced so that we can think of more ways of doing things. So the next slide saying that we have, 133 million jobs to be created. Example, I give you an idea. What jobs can you think of that were not even existent maybe 20, 30 years ago? I'll give you a few seconds for that. Exactly. So example, you were looking at, maybe even robotics, not necessarily a robot like, a physical robot, but it could be any kind of, application or software development, or, a plug-in in your computer, things like this. So this is part of the revolution that we're talking about. Example, a specific job, cybersecurity analyst. Maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago, this job, the cybersecurity analyst, was not yet available. If there were, of course, there were in Silicon Valley, it's very rare. And not all organizations are required to do so, to find for a person, who will be good at this. So it's a rare job. But now, a lot of companies, more than 50% of all companies in the world are looking for a cybersecurity analyst because it is also incorporated and integrated into the law, such as the information security, management system, or even with the data privacy or the GDPR. So these are the things that has created a push to create more jobs. Example, social media analyst or social media marketing. Before, when you are in the advertising and marketing, space, you're only known for as either you're an advertiser, a PR, a public relations, or a marketer. But now you have new platforms. We have social media influencer, which can also be like a marketing, personnel as well. So these are the new phases of the revolution we're talking about. So the next slide, we'll think about, how does that, pan out, in terms of, you know, what do we think about the fourth industrial revolution? So if you're thinking sci-fi or maybe futuristic, we actually don't know what that job is all about. But what we know is that what kind of skill sets will be required with that. Just the same thing, this, maybe 100 years ago when nobody was still using computers, they don't know what job, a computer analyst would be. They don't know what an ATM component creator could be. Those jobs specifically are not yet existent 100 years ago, but we have those jobs now. But what they knew in the past is that, this is skill sets. So the next slide, that we are going to look at is that as an ASEAN, part of the ASEAN region, what are those requirements, that we have to be aware of? So in terms of the industrial revolution from an HR perspective, you have to understand that, 14% are at higher risk right now, being, completely automated. So, these are radically reshaped. So the jobs that we have, including the competencies that we have, will be definitely reshaped. So the sad thing with that, specifically in the Philippines and also other countries on the third world, 6 out of 10 workers are not even equipped with computer skills, or even just experience to flourish in the organization that requires the skills. So the next slide would say that, in preparation for that, a lot of companies are really looking at global business. So for them to flourish into a global business, if you're going to look at the graph on the right side of your screen, you know rather than going linear, you have to disrupt your industry by using technology. So you have to leverage on technology to ensure that your growth will be exponential as well. So this exponential organization will look into, a lot of new ways of doing things. So the next slide would say that, as we go with disruption, there are new, parameters, or even, industries will be, booming as well. So example is your mass 3D printing, your biotechnology, your deep learning and chatbots. These are very sci-fi or futuristic, if I may use that word, if you're in the 60s, in the 70s, these are just concepts in the past. I remember there are movies even that says, you have the smell of vision, you can smell from the TV. And that might not even be, far-fetched in the future. You can actually smell from TV in the future. So the next slide would say that, as you go along, the workforce of tomorrow is something that we have to be really keen on looking at. So 91% of the jobs of the future will say technology is something that will be definitely influencing our job choices as well. So a lot of people, because of the COVID pandemic, will be looking more for jobs that are, that will be definitely looking at freelancing. So if you look about, how does technology affect the organization, a lot of people will be wanting to work for companies that has cutting edge technology. A lot of the organizations are also looking for people who are equipped. So therefore, the children of today who are studying, maybe when I was still studying a few years ago, is that there's still just a traditional courses, like you have your business administration, you have your management, marketing, you have your science courses. But now there are new courses in college and the university that are geared towards technology, such as gaming development, social media, even cloud-based courses, things like this. So it means that the preferential approaches of organization is geared towards this trend. So a lot of the companies will be definitely offering either home base or nearby locate work location. So these are the things that had helped the industrialization, especially in terms of HR. So in the next slide, we'll talk about more, how do we see ourselves now in terms of the job? So it means that for we have to be introspective, what skills do I have now to be ready for that industrialization we're talking about? So there will be a great revolution of the mindset. So whatever skill set you might have, definitely that's something that you will have to replace 42% of it. Your current skill set will no longer be as useful. I'm not saying that you will not use it, but we're saying that, to be really equipped and be relevant to the job in the next, 5 to 10 years, you have to be sure that you have the new skill sets required of that. So thinking about it, um, you have to be setting yourself every 1.5 years, 1.5 years, that your skill sets have, an expiration. So you have to reskill again. So the next slide would say that, you have to be diverse in terms of working at home opportunities now. So this will be the new trends that's coming up. I know in the Philippines it's a relatively new concept, but in the US and also in Europe, work at home opportunities is something that they've been doing, for many, many years already. So the flexibility is they're already there. But in the Philippines, it's something new. If not for COVID, not many people will be very familiar with the setup of work from home. So that means that because of the work from home, if you notice, we've been locked down for 60 days or more. So Filipinos being ingenious, you have to be near to your customers, right? So there's a lot of applications now that now available, just like example Sprout, right? So to make your payroll be more accessible to your employees. So it's just a click of a button. You can even download it to your system, things like this. So the next slide would say that, for you to be able to understand, just like the little thingamajiggy on this hand, this technology is actually available. It's just not mass produced, but it is already there. So it means that it's not far-fetched that, people will be starting to be more creative, making it more available for the public, making it more mass produced. So we will definitely deconstruct things around us to make it more, either make our lives more easier, make our environment much safer, things like this. So the next slide would say, according to the World Economic Forum, for us to survive in the Industrial Revolution, it's not just about the technology. what this leaders is talking about in 2018 and until now is about creativity. It's about, critical thinking. Because for you to create new things, it's not about what is already there. It's about what you're going to prepare in the future. So the same thing when you're an HR, you have to be understanding of the dynamics of the environment. So therefore, the co-creation should be there, meaning the HR practitioner should be understanding of the skill sets, what competencies are required, what should make this person, be successful in their future jobs, or the skill sets that will be required of them. So the next slide would say even that several World Economic Forums have even said that we have to think about the institution of work, because the work that we have been doing has been there for quite a long time, decades and decades of cadence, and even the institution of our policies, our governance, are had been very much inclined towards what's happening, either from an office-based work. So it means that we have to think now, because a lot of people are working at home. So we have to think about, rethink how this institution of work is going to be. So definitely there will be more of the green economy, and even collective intelligence will be more rampant. Just like what we're doing right now. Before, webinars are almost unheard of in the Philippines. I used to do some podcasts in the past, but it's very, very little audience. But now almost everybody is waiting for a webinar, either from Sprout Solutions or other organizations here in the Philippines or abroad. So it means that the skill sets, the innovation, and even the quality of the jobs will definitely, surpass the requirements that we have right now, that what we are pretty much got used to. So the next slide would say that as we go along, there are new focus on the skills, in terms of upscaling ourselves and even upskilling ourselves, so that we will be ready for the industrial revolution. So from an HR perspective, for organizations to think about, what is the next step for our employees, because if my employees are successful and they have these sets of skills and competencies, and they are equipped to do the job, then you know we can guarantee that no matter what our organization will go through, whether it's the pandemic, we are able to sustain. The resilience of the organization will still be very much intact. So these are the different competencies and skill sets that many people would be needing, such as either creativity, communication, empathy, even personality development, and even time management. I know we're almost everybody's working from home. Time management now, especially working from home, is much more difficult, because you're just at home and people expect you to be always online. So it's really difficult. So the next slide would say that for us to be very much attuned to the requirements, so we have to understand now an agile organization. We have the agile culture, or agile working setup, or even the agile workplace will be there. So the workplace is no longer just a building. Before, the talks, for many years in the HR communities, like we talk about life the work life balance. But now the question would be, is how does that happen now, because you're working at home, right? So how do you balance now the work and the life, because you're always at home? So is it now a different thing? So this working practices will enable us to understand whether the physical infrastructure of the work, is it still in the building, or now, because the culture now is, because half of the people is required to work at home, because that is the legislation, to have 50% work, skeleton workforce, then what kinds of attitudes or skills or even processes will have to be put into an infrastructure that will rapidly change the organization to be ready for that? So the next slide would say that, having this agility will now create this different workplace scenarios. So some people will be, very much geared towards either an emotional workplace. Are they looking for something that is physical? Maybe they're still very much traditional. Or there will be some employees or applicants who will be more geared towards like technologically advanced workplace. There are still, employees or people who will be, very much attached to either culture based or leadership based or even employee engagement based and even corporate values based workplace. So now the organization from an HR perspective, from an HR business partnering perspective, is to give that insight to the organization so that we can prepare for the employees of the future. So this future of workplace will now be integrated into many different aspects, whether it's a work culture, a well-being, or is it a technologically savvy or even an industrial type of organization setup, or their physical setup could be as well, will be greatly affected, and it need to be purposive as well. So the next slide would say that, as we tag along the future of the workplace, we will definitely understand that on the next slide, we can verify that, the future of work will revolve around these three main factors, culture, force, and space. So this have been tremendously changed, especially now because of the COVID. If I'm just going to use that, as a catalyst of change, it's definitely something of very bad, but it also has created some very unique opportunities for people, whether they're employees or if they are the owners of the company. So now the connectivity will no longer be physical connectivity, but instead a spatial connectivity, which is digitally enhanced and technologically adapted. So smart facilities, like example, if you go to fast food now, whether you're going to McDonald's or things like that, you can't dine in. You just have to go to take out or you order online. So that space is no longer there. It has a difference, but the business will continue, right? So the culture as well has also changed. The way that people are aligned into using digital skills because of the need it has created. So it creates now that force, between humans and technology, how this automation, augmentation, and even, the reality that we are in right now, has created that. So I'm on my last slide, on the next slide. This is very critical for those who are looking at the industrial revolution. From HR perspective, it's not about what you can create right now. It's not about the technology that you know already, but instead having this top 10 skills will create more, outputs in the future. So it's all about, what can you do? What can you do? So you need at least this top 10 skills, complex problem solving and critical thinking. This is how to deconstruct, how to rearrange, how to look at beyond and past the surface. So being able to deep dive into your processes, into your business processes, and how to rethink about it. And of course, creativity and people management are two, you know, definitely surmountable information that will be needed, because you have to think about outside of the box, and your emotional intelligence will have to be there, just like right now everybody's working from home. So you can't tap on the back to say good job. You can't even reward them with physical gifts because they're far away, they're locked down somewhere in a different place. So this emotional intelligence has now also changed. It's still the same emotional intelligence, but the application and the way it's being used is different. So the judgment and decision making will definitely, and dramatically and drastically has changed the way organizations has worked. The service orientation has been more focused than ever, and definitely our negotiation and cognitive flexibility is going to be there. So with that being said, I'd like to end my note with, definitely the ASEAN HR Leader Circle is something that you can find online, and you can reach us there. We do have some other webinars that were coming up as well, and not only just in the Philippines. But I'd like to thank Sprout for giving opportunities like this to organizations to share what's happening, because in the Philippines, I know we're very much, we're in a bubble in terms of what's happening, but it doesn't mean we're just going through it, alone. We're going through this globally. So for us to understand, that, our other ASEAN, brother and sister countries out there, they're also, doing things. So I think it's critical that we learn from them. We also critical that we learn from their mistakes as well, so that we can apply something more innovative, something more helpful for our organization. So with that being said, thank you so much, and that's my presentation for this tip. So see you later.
Thank you, Marvin, for that informative talk. So now I'd like to announce the second raffle keyword for today. So for our second raffle keyword, it is ASEAN. Again, the second raffle keyword for today is ASEAN. So that you'll get to know more about who are we and Sprout, please watch this video before we move on to the fireside chat portion of the event.
The Philippines is an amazing place because of the people here. I'm constantly blown away by the work ethic of young professionals in this country. And that's a really powerful thing. And that has driven an economy that's growing at a phenomenal rate. On top of that, we have all of these challenges, like inefficiencies in really big things and really small things, and those are all opportunities for these enterprising people to make a difference in the country. And these people are working by and large in small businesses that are struggling to get by. It's super powerful if we can help that huge group of companies, of people who are the ones responsible for pushing this country forward at the amazing rate that it is moving forward.
Hope you enjoyed the video. So I'd like to announce the third raffle keyword for today, which is upscale. Again, the last keyword for today is upscale. So to give a recap, the three keywords are industrialization, ASEAN, and upscale. Again, the three keywords are industrialization, ASEAN, and upscale. So join the raffle by following our Sprout Facebook page and commenting these three keywords on the pin post. So the next portion of the event is our fireside chat. Prepare your questions and just type them in the chat box. I'd like to welcome back our first speaker, Mr. Marvin Zoilo. And for our second panelist, let's welcome Mr. Lester Nazarene Oplek, Sprout's Legal Counsel and Public Sector Engagement Lead. For our third panelist, she has 10 years of experience as an HR professional and is now the Learning and Engagement Lead for Sprout Solutions, focusing in employee events and training and giving importance to the mental health, the well-being of our people. Let's welcome Ms. May Arerio. And finally, for our fourth panelist, she has more than 5 years of experience in human resource, overseeing recruitment, employee relations, and performance management in Sprout. Please welcome Shang Trinidad. Welcome, panelists, and ladies and gentlemen, we're now opening the floor for your questions. Type them in the Zoom chat box. So, panelists, for our first question, given the changes in work setup, especially during the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, do you think the Philippines will be ready to embrace this level of industrialization in the years to come? What are the major considerations we should look into progress to this kind of innovation? Again, given the changes in the work setup, especially during the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, do you think the Philippines will be ready to embrace this level of industrialization in the years to come? And what are the major considerations we should look into progress to this kind of innovation?
Yeah, I'd like to take that question first, Kat. So first, good morning, Marvin, Mei Shang, and to all of our attendees in this webinar. Thank you for joining us again. So regarding the question of Miss Lori, let me first tackle the legal aspect of this. No, so in terms of protection of laborers' rights or employees' rights, it's good. It's good for us that the labor code has already enshrined protecting the employees' rights in cases when employers engage in innovation. So the law already provides for the legal requirements as to how and when an employer may let go of particular personnel through installation of labor-saving devices or redundancy. And the requirement there is to comply with the notice requirement. There's a 30-day notice to the employee and to the Department of Labor, as well as the payment of separation pay. But if you would go to the previous episodes of this webinar, I was able to discuss what are the options aside from retrenchment, redundancy, and laying off of personnel for employers to be able to accommodate changes in the environment, in the working environment. I personally advocate retooling and reassigning personnel because it gives the employees more skills in terms of um, the value that they add to the employer. It's a lot better for an employee to be equipped with new skills, new competencies, for them to be able to contribute more to the business, and that makes them in turn more employable if ever they go out of the employer's wing. Okay.
Okay. So our second question, how does AI further enhance HR capabilities? Again, how does AI further enhance HR capabilities?
Do you want me to answer it? From an HR perspective, AI is not something that is new. In the past many years, I'm sure many of the HR practitioners who are watching today had an experience of the traditional way of doing things. Example, maybe they set out with recruitment by saying, "Oh, can you submit your CV or your bio data, which is physical, and then you have to scour your pictures, things like that from your photo albums and things like this. But it means that towards as technology becomes available, resumes such as online availability, you can just submit it anywhere, anytime. So this provision of technology has definitely helped. Aside from that, as we progress, we can even do virtual meetings. We can do conference meetings. We can even provide, the testing availability either through the computer or through their mobile apps. So it means that the artificial intelligence that is available right now may not necessarily be Alexa giving an interview with you, but it means that the availability of HR applications had tremendously put back the time and investment to where it should be, such as making sure that your recruiters or your talent acquisition specialists can choose the best person because they have enough time to go through these resumes rather than just filing them, encoding them, and to create questions that is really relevant to the job and understand and evaluate the competencies required for each of the skill sets for that job. So it has tremendously pushed back in terms of the manual labor, the administrative part of the job, and bringing back the time for our recruiters and our HRs to focus on what's really important and vital to the organization, which is to choose the proper people for those particular openings and vacancies.
I'd like to
Um,
add to what Marvin mentioned. No? So one thing about AI implementation in the HR space is that it adds a layer of compliance, particularly on the data privacy side. The National Privacy Commission, through Circular 17-01, mandates the registration of automated processing systems when certain criteria are met, particularly when there are 250 people employed by the organization, or when the processing includes the sensitive personal information of at least 1,000 individuals. Now, if your AI application require or meets the said parameters, you are required under the said privacy circular, which is NPC Circular 17-01, to register. But that's the mandatory side. The law also allows the voluntary registration of any organization who implements processing, even if they do not meet the parameters stated in the said privacy circular. So if you implement AI, please do consider the regulatory and compliance side as well. But I agree with Marvin. On a personal note, I remember when I was with the government, I was tasked to study the creation of a new salary scale, and it was really hard to do without you know data to work with. So I had to go back to my private sector experience and think through how it was done by the larger organizations. The Towers Watsons and the Mercers of the world. They have their certain frameworks or approaches to creating salary scales. So I applied that to a government context, and at the end of the day, you really have to manipulate data, and having a tool that helps you manipulate that data is a lot more it's easier to do compared to manually encoding, inputting, and then creating your formulas from scratch. And this is where tools like Sprout actually help.
Yeah, so I'd like to add also, AI played a significant role in HR right now. It helps in automating, common HR tasks like benefits management, recruitment, candidate assessment, handling common questions or requests like spice work. So it really helps us in, reducing bias. But like what Attorney Lester said, we have to ensure the compliance part in artificial intelligence and human resources.
Thank you, panelists. So for our next question, what will be the position of HR in the next year or decades if the modern industrialization takes place? Again, what will be the position of HR in the next year or decades if the modern industrialization takes place?
Let me answer that. So from an ASEAN region, not just in the Philippines, so we put context onto how much industrialization can happen in the Philippines. So the sufficient services to its people is number one. The second one is the nationalization. So these two components are basic, in terms of establishing the strategies for the Philippines, whether it's a Philippine growth, or it could be an economy, or it could be the services just available in the Philippines for our investors to come in. But because of the COVID, this is something that has been currently just a little bit stunted. But it doesn't mean the sustainability of economic growth will not happen. The independents are still being much feasible in terms of what's going to happen. So maybe now there could be some lack of necessary know-hows or even the capacity to develop them in terms of modern products. But the HR will still be very much resilient. Like what I mentioned early in my talk, the 10 points that you have, like your critical thinking, your complex capability to make decision making, and even leadership will still be there. So the self-reliant economy that will be, part of the current orientation that we have because of the COVID will propel us further into thinking, what else can we do beside this? So the leverage and technology will help us understand, what are the opportunities for the Philippines, in relation to what other countries are doing. Example, Vietnam, they have this infrastructure available, starting with internet. You might think that the Korea or even China has the fastest internet. It's actually Vietnam, Philippines, in relation to the Philippine internet, right? So this particular aspirations for the Philippines may need a lot of research and development, or even protection of the workers' rights for the meantime. But it doesn't mean it doesn't provide this leverage for our HR community to think outside of the box and what else is out there. HR is not just an administrative portion of the organization. It should be a business partnering portion of the organization where you can leverage on collective intelligence, where you can talk about, creating, co-creation of opportunities for different departments, whether to uplift, how to make their organizations lean, and provide processes and infrastructure that would be helpful for the next couple of years. So we see a lot of different opportunities, especially in terms of technology adapted into HR.
I'd like to dovetail what Marvin said. So in terms of the ASEAN integration, this has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, tayo sa Pilipinas medyo huli lang tayo dito. But on the legal side, we approach this on two fronts. No, we have a nationalization approach as well as a regionalization approach. No, what do I mean by nationalization? It means that while we are moving towards regionalization, there is increased mobility of capital and skilled labor across the ASEAN. One aspect that we all have to understand is that when the workforce is in the locality in the country where the operations will be delivered, they are now subject to the national laws of the country where they are placed in. And particularly for the Philippines, we have so many nationalization laws. For example, the practice of licensed professions. All of these are restricted to Philippine nationals. So the practice of medicine, of law, these are things that are reserved exclusively for Philippine nationals.
Mhm.
But you also have to understand that the regionalization has to take place because your skilled laborer here in the Philippines, for example, a skilled lawyer or a skilled physician, may be tapped by other regions to perform work that is licensed. No, so there's a totally different framework that you will have to go through, and that adds a layer of complexity. And these are compliance boxes, but not only compliance boxes. These are things that HR should strategically look into because this now gives you a different playing field. But the beauty of it is that this gives you a larger pool with which to tap your markets in. This gives you a larger talent pool as well, where you can do recruitment.
Thank you. So or another question, how or where does one start upscaling and upskilling as management, then as an organization? Again, how or where does one start upscaling and upskilling as management, then as an organization?
I'd like to start that question with a personal sharing. No, I was doing this before I embarked on my bar review. No, before I went on my bar review, I actually spent like 3 weeks. I was learning about learning. No, so it's very important that we not only talk about management and organizational upskilling. We have to talk about individual upskilling as well. One thing that in the Seven Habits training, if you read the book or attended the training, a very important concept there is sharpening the saw. And on an individual level, you have to start there. If you do not sharpen the saw, keep continuously learning and interacting with peers and exchanging whatever you learned. Um, and then you go to the 70-20-10 model of adult learning. No, these are the things that you have to continuously engage in because you learning starts from oneself, and adapting to a changing business landscape or economic landscape, it really boils down to how you as an individual adapt and adjust. I'd like to check with the other panelists.
Yeah,
Anything? Yeah.
definitely. According, I'd like to piggyback on attorney's information. Definitely, if we think about the industrial revolution, thinking about the first industrial revolution, where steel industries or the manufacturing in England, and now we're looking at digital in revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. These industries are still here, so it means that it has, stayed on with the test of time. It's just a matter of how adapting those industries could be. There could be a little bit tweak on here and there, to be understood, to be understanding of, what are the different pathways, where their standards could be. So whether their products are going to be re-engineered, or how their services are going to be recalculated, and how it's going to be remastered and re-advertised to their or to their customers. It's really a matter of strengthening what they already have in place, and also understanding the quality standards that you said that they should put into the efforts that they have, and understanding also the standards and the substance that they need to put into in terms of their infrastructure, as well as their policy making and governance, and how their leadership should be putting a big weight on how to move forward people at each stage of their organization, where they're now moving from, because they've been closed down by COVID, what's the next step. So it means that's where your reskilling and upscaling should be. So the investment should be, how do I make sure that my high potential employees will stick with me and go through this phase and these stages in life, whether it's the life cycle of your organization or even just your own personal experience as an employee. Each one of us, I'm always talking out from an HR perspective, that yes, we are workers, yes, we are employees, but we are also humans. So it means that these factors will have to be considered by organization. That's why I was talking earlier, there will be people will be 51% or more will be looking for freelancing, because they have understood the value of the family now more than ever, or they understand that at the first few weeks it's boring, but now they have worked in a way into understanding how to navigate towards working at home, how to make efficient runs to the market, and even cooking food for your family, and the same time multitasking for your computer deliverables. So these problems had become feasible because of technology. So it's not going away, it's actually just going to continuously enhance the way we do things. And that's why the top skills of upskilling and reskilling as well will help us understand what are the different strengths that we can play on an upscale perspective, and what can we downscale in terms of the old traditional way of institution of work.
Also, if I may add to Marvin's and Attorney Lester's context, no? So what we usually do here in Sprout is to also begin with by assessing the gaps or the needs of our employees from a performance management tool. So yun, and also we do incorporate our core values with agility and innovation. In fact, we suggest our clients or customers that having an agility subject or even like a presentation to our new hires, maganda siyang gawin actually, kasi you can also check the coping mechanisms of our employees or even the adaptability, since nowadays COVID is here and the pandemic is really rising. And also even the technology, we also have like Zoom. We teach our employees how to navigate Zoom and even Google Meet. So there. All right. So for our next question, how can we achieve high productivity during remote from work set? Again, how can we achieve high productivity during remote from work setup?
Let me take the first dibs on that. So from a labor force perspective, we have no choice. Just like any other, any other country, the Philippines is also on lockdown. Just last night, actually, I was watching the news from Singapore, and they're actually lifting their circuit breaker on June 1st. And they have provided the different stages, as to how to go about, coming back, reintegration to the society, things like this. But still, there will be a lot of, restrictions and limitations as to what people can do. So the same thing that's right now, we're in this situation wherein we look at our workforce, if not 50%, 60%, or even 70%, into the largest proportion ever that happened in the Philippines history, where people are just at home, right? Um, Last time people were just at home was during the war. So the great opportunity, whether it's economic growth or employment growth or even industrial capacity, these are things that is beyond people's minds now, right? Because just you're staying at home. um, so being able to understand what is your strength as a practitioner, whether you're in HR or marketing or whatever your job line is understanding those, different aspects of your job. And to be efficient is to understand, how does this work for you? How can you utilize this, and how can you even collectively collaborate with people, just like what we're doing right now. The ASEAN HR Leader Circle is collaborating with Sprout, right? So because we are bringing value to the table, it's just not about just a service right now. It's about the value that you can create for your organization, and also the audience and the customers that you have. So it's a pleasant thing to note that, just like our other panelists is saying, that the technologies out there, we're using Zoom, or we might be using other platforms as well to make it easier to connect with other people. uh, these are just one of the few things. Maybe even later on, maybe 20 years from now, there could be another technology that you don't need actually, a platform such as Zoom. So but it's a matter of the value that we put into that perspective, whether it's for employment, or it is for a service that we provide to our customers, or just even an advocacy out there for organizations out there. So really understanding the proportions it create in terms of the value that we put out, and make it efficient for us, whether we're at home, or we are in a co-working space, or back to the office.
I'd like to dovetail again on what Marvin mentioned. No? So I think aside from what he mentioned, one important thing is having the policies and the tools in place. It's difficult to drive productivity if if your workforce is not technologically and from a mind frame perspective, hindi sila equipped. Just to by way of example, ito yung classic example natin ngayon with school setup, na yung mga estudyante, they are required to submit schoolwork, and yet the schools themselves do not have the proper equipment for their students to be able to submit the requirements, no? And that is the unfortunate thing to happen. If you want to drive productivity, make sure that your policies and your tools and your overall management mindset is set to productivity. For example, you may have if you don't have a corporate email account, paano kayo magta-track ng the productivity? If you don't have an HRIS that allows for remote log-in, log-out like Sprout, how do you track people coming in and out of the office, or logging in, logging out of work? These things are, it sounds fairly innocuous, pero if ang dali niyang kaligtaan na parang, just drive productivity and then bahala na kung paano natin ito track. But in driving that productivity, let's also remember that everyone is human. We're driving productivity in a time that anxiety is high. Some people are suffering from diminished earning capacity because of the workplace or because of the physical restrictions. So let's temper that expectation for productivity with compassion as well and understanding.
Okay, just to add, so the importance of HR there is providing employees the tools that they need to ensure that laptops or cell phones or even communication allowance are provided to employees to ensure productivity. And also, it should be a two-way street between management and employees. So it's very important to set mutually understood expectations between the two parties, meaning you should be able to set clear expectations and guidelines, anong pwede, anong hindi, hanggang sa ano limitations mo when working from home, minsan kasi we go out to run errands or groceries, sabi nga ni Atty. Lester, malasakit is very important. So in management perspective, aside from ensuring compliance, we should be able to understand also where they're coming from, especially during this time wherein napakahirap talaga ng situation.
All right, thank you, panelists. So our time is up for this panel session. Thank you, Attorney Lester, Ming, Shang, and Mr. Marvin Zoilo for your informative inputs. Sir Marvin, as our special guest, would like to present you with a certificate of appreciation and a token which will be given after the webinar. Thank you also to our event partner, ASEAN HR Leader, Circle Philippines, a nonprofit organization whose membership is for HR leaders. And before we end the webinar, I'd also like to announce that our Sprout Rescue Kit is on full swing this summer. You can still get all the HR help you need as we extend our sign-ups for our Sprout Rescue Kit until May 31. So you get free 60 days access to HR and payroll system, Instacash, and BCP expert advice. So sign up at the link in the screen, or you may contact me at katreeds@sprout.ph. So now for the moment we've all been waiting for, I'd like to announce the 4 raffle winners. So for our raffle winners, we have Miss Sarah Magbag, Marvy Andes, Ronald Ambal, and Francis Gases. Again, the winners are Sarah Magbag, Marvy Andes, Ronald Ambal, and Francis Gases. So for the winners, please type your email address in the Zoom chat box so that we can send you the GC codes through email. Thank you everyone for participating. So we can also send you e-certificates for attending this session. So here are the instructions on how you can get them. All you have to do is email info@sprout.ph. Please indicate your full name, company, and position. Also, you may follow our social media pages and use the hashtag OBWithSprout to be updated on our events. See you on our next webinar on Thursday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Don't
Thank
forget
you.
to go to our Facebook page.